So I'm assuming that all the Strigan stuff's on the Google Drive, yeah?
Yeah, it's all in Vilden Ancestries, and yeah. Precedence is in the reference material. That's probably going to be mostly for me because I know where to look for things. But just, everything's in the proper forms. And I filled out all the contracts as required of me. I just forgot how much of like Warframe is a game where you need like the wiki up on your other monitor.
Yeah, it really is, though.
I have so many tabs. But,
Okay.
Okay.
First off, let's review the sidebar.
Yes.
Alright, hit points 8. What's the general range of hit points again? Can you remind me?
6 to 10.
Okay.
Now, I was thinking like 10 potentially, but then I was thinking about the fact that they're like more like they are fightery, but they also have the kind of like because they have the kind of Gish feel, it's the balance. 8's in the middle.
Yeah. Gish?
Gish, Gish, not Gith. Gish is like the term for like a one-hand sword, one-hand magic of like the kind of mix.
Oh, yeah.
Mental prowess.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, like, since Dolem's also in the lineup, and I'm pretty sure they had 10, right? I think?
They should. If they don't, that's an easy fix.
Yeah, that's a 10. They have 10. So I think, I think from a balancing, or from a nice kind of balance standpoint. And humans have 8 as well. Yeah, I know, I could see that. Because you could have big, bulky humans, too. So, like, yeah, no, I'm good with 8. I think that seems reasonable.
Yeah. Especially because, like, your class and stuff also adds hit points. That's one of the things.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I agree with base, normal, because 20 feet is pretty standard, right? For movement.
20 is, well, okay, so 20 is like, 20 is the lowest end on speed. 30 is the highest. 30 shows up like, only, 30 is like really fast. 25 is like standard. It goes 20, 25. 20 is typically for smaller races or bulkier races. So like, for instance, the 20. Part of it is because, at least with the way that some of the speed thing is a major balancing factor for some of the abilities. So if the sidebar abilities might change, then theoretically they could get faster. But I think that's probably
Okay. Yeah, no. Let me see. How heavy are owls? Because I think potentially owls can be physically big and imposing without necessarily being dense.
right.
Because like a lot of it's feathers and stuff, so they have a massive silhouette and stuff like that.
You did tell me to kind of, in the thing we had written them down as like bruisers and kind of muscle wizardy. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's a different take, right? Because dolems are the literal physical, where part of the whole predator bird thing is they appear big and menacing without necessarily, but they're creatures that have the ability to fly. So there's that agileness to them as well. So I'm not. This is me kind of externally processing.
Yeah, go through it. You're good.
So I would potentially prefer for them to have. Yeah, I think so. I feel like it feels right because it gets that kind of agility despite being large, which I think is kind of a nice twist to like not literally big, I'm the Hulk, but literally like a I appear large and so I'm intimidating, but in reality I still part of the fear factor is I'm like able to like dive for the sky and pounce type of thing. You know what I'm saying?
I got you. No, it wouldn't be that bad of a change. I think part of it was also the fact that like we didn't have a lot of 20 speed races in our ancestry.
That's fair. No, that's true. Part of it's because we'll make the Neverlings 20. We'll make sure the Neverlings are 20.
Yes. Well, if they're small races get decreased movement because of their smallness.
Do Kira not have 20?
They do. There's there's like an ancestry that gives them 25, I think.
Gotcha. Because theoretically, like that would mean that we'd have 2 on both, one on each side.
Well, 3 with Sentinel. Sorry, I was saying we have 2 currently. Because Sentinel
Gotcha.
is kind of, I believe they're 20. Let me double check.
Are gnomes not 20?
We're getting rid of gnomes.
I know, but what I'm getting at is like, oh no, apparently they had 25 feet.
Really?
Well, at least that's what you wrote in the sidebar for them.
Yeah. Well,
Which I assume is copied straight from the book, so...
Yeah, I copied everything from core. That... I may have forgotten, because they're also at 8. Maybe they are, and I'm just... I don't know. One way to... Wow, I really misspelled that. Let's see. Gnome. Yeah, no, 8 and 25 feet, despite being small. Interesting. Huh.
So Neverling will make him... Because to be fair, Neverling is kind of taking the place, or is your stand-in for either Halfling or Gnome.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be very interesting to think about, like, when you think of it, if the Aldian core, or at the very least, the part of Aldenweld that controls their side of the fold, because I imagine that's the primary people that are coming over, the people in that general area, which is not necessarily all of Aldenweld in its entirety, but it's the core peoples from over there.
All right, but no, 25. That's a fine change. I like faster races, anyways.
I figured you did.
You know,
I think you and Mary Beth both have a Strigan backup character. But let's see. So 25 feet. Because as cool as it would be to have 30, I feel like that's a bit much. Do we have yeah, I think the only 30-foot race that we have, is that the Dracade?
I believe so. I believe.
I don't think there's a...
Yeah.
Which I think physicality-wise makes the most sense.
Also, speed is a big thing. If we went up to 30, I'd probably need to cut one of these.
No, I agree. No, I'm on the same page as far as like the Strigan don't need to have that. I was just thinking about like the other ancestries and stuff like that, as far as like
kind of balancing yep.
Yeah, because like that does mean, interestingly enough, though I think this is probably, I don't know if there's a 30-foot standard non-uncommon ancestry in the core necessarily.
Elves.
Oh, elves at 30 feet? I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that makes sense. Because like what I'm wondering is like right now none of our core have 30 feet, which isn't necessarily a problem.
I mean, it's just like, who would you give 30? I mean, like you could
Frank.
If you're going like the pixie vibe, you could say Neverlings, but
I don't really think so, because like the smallness, it doesn't necessarily make sense. Though that's an interesting. Though I mean, on the other hand, like just like spaghetti balling it, you could do it two ways. You could do it where it's 20. The other way you could do it is, you know how like there's always that cliche thing where like you turn around and turn back and the kid somehow vanished into another room. Well, you could do that vibe by the fact they're incredibly fast. And so that, I mean, there's a vibe there.
And that's
especially with
like
the mischievous.
Yeah, like the trickster mischief vibes.
Yeah, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. Let's have them release 30 feet of movement. I think that feels fun. Because the only other ancestry that comes to mind that you could possibly make the argument for, kind of with the way that we're building them, is Skliverni, ironically enough.
Yeah.
Because in some ways the Skliverni have similar to the Na'vi from Avatar, like not Avatar the Last Airbender, but like, you know, what's his face's like big billion-dollar motion picture, like the big blue people. Skliverni have like a similar vibe to that to an extent, where they're big and fast and like, you know, they've got the jet blaze and like, you know, da 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 da, attack on the Jaeger or whatever, you know, like that's not up there.
Attack on the Jaeger. At the end season.
Yeah. Damn.
I'm just everything, man.
Yeah. But But yeah, so that's the only other ancestry I could see having that, just simply because of that vibe. Not that Scorpion
Neverling gives Aldenweld and Vilden both a 30-foot speed people.
Yes, it's just Vilden has it more, or has it less common.
Absolutely.
Which is perfectly fine. Though, actually, that might be an interesting Skullvern feat.
Oh, like fleet? Like a fleet equivalent where you get 5 extra feet of speed.
Yeah, and so you just have the sprint, you have the scout Glovern type like feat thing.
That's what I was actually thinking about myself when you were talking about that kind of thing of like not Skloverni naturally, like their physical build means that they're probably not like 30, but you could easily train to be 30.
Right, so you've got like a thinner, like smaller Glovern going. That'd be terrifying. Like, like a double jet bladed like scout Glovern just going like spin. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Cool. Definitely write that in the finish with press underscore any ideas.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with Neverlings having base movement split 30. I think that's cool. And then a cool feat for the Skloverni. Good stuff. I do like this because what I like about this is not that we're ever going to make our own RPG system ever necessarily. Maybe one day. When we're both in our 40s.
It's not how our age gap works, Gregory.
Yeah, you and I actually... No. I could be at the very end of 40 and you could be at the very beginning of 40. Our age gap is not more than 10 years apart.
We'll have exactly like 1 year-ish to make an entire RPG system so we can do it in our 40s.
Yeah. Look, man, I'm just saying. See, how old is Matt Colville? How old do you have to be? How old is Matt Colville? How old are you, man? You got to be in your 40s, right? I feel like that's nationality American. Yeah, thanks, man. How old are you? Give me your birth certificate. Age. How old is Matt Colville?
Where does he live? Is it California?
I'm not sure. I don't know, actually.
Yeah, well, he's either 36, 53, 51, 38, or 31.
Based off of what?
Based off of OSINT. Look, man, I got a list of names and I got a list of ages. There's a lot of Matt Covilles in California. Huh. There's a 42-year-old Matt Coville.
See, where does Matt Colville live? You got on a list. Where does Matthew Colville live? Okay, well, he's the founder of MCDM Productions. Where are they located? Let's see, MCD Productions. Important.
I would say this is not the rabbit hole I thought we were going to go down today.
Irvine, California.
Nope. Okay, so there are 3 Matt Covilles in California. Oh. Let's see. So he is either 42, 38, or 53.
He's got to be 42 or 53. Frankly, he looks young enough that maybe he's 42. I could see that. Yeah, that guy doesn't look like he's in his 50s.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like he's in his 20s.
I would say he's got like he's starting to get the gray fox kind of look.
Yeah.
40s.
Yeah.
I'll give him 40s.
Okay. So there you go. You got to be in your 40s.
Yep. No one's ever done it younger or after. Only the 40s.
And he's the guy who always says, and you can find that in the doobly-doo. Down in the doobly-doo. He's the guy who says that. Is that a plug adapter on your ruler?
Yeah. Man, I gotta adapt my ruler to the times.
Everything you just said was just factually inaccurate. Just on a massive scale. All right, pet to Strigan. Side part aside.
Right.
This is why I'm getting tested for ADHD in May, April, or whenever I got that appointment.
Don't get tested. Just self-regulate, like everybody else. Fuck knowledge.
Yeah, well,
Knowledge.
no, I'm just. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to be aware, not because I want drugs. I'm just curious. And I also figure if I know specifically what kind I have, I might have a better idea of how to self-regulate. Plus, just because a kid, because I've. Oh, me opening this?
Yeah, I'm surprised it came through the mic.
I'm surprised it did too. All right, 3
I
again.
went back and forth with the strength boost, with the ability boost. Like, I originally had Constitution, like a flaw and something else, and then I changed it to strength as a boost. I wasn't sure. Wisdom felt it felt right. Wisdom.
No, wisdom. I 100%. Wisdom. I 100% agree. Let me look up something quick.
Yeah, because I feel like the boost is a toss-up between strength, dexterity, and constitution.
Oh, I might have a video to send you that's related. Once I get past this stupid ad, hold on.
Call the ad stupid, Gregory. It has a family. It has a love life. It has a wife. It has 3 kids. One's named Jenna. 2 are named Bob and Geese. Geese is a little slow. He had to be held back a couple years because they figured out he was special ed. Are you making fun of Geese?
I'm making fun of Geese. No, don't make Geese. I love how this was probably a test to see if I was listening or not. Yep! Yep, I know exactly what ability boost we need to have. 0-0 this will be.
Alrighty. Oh no. Oh no. Oh. Oh. Oh no.
Are you
No,
gonna
the ad was the worst thing imaginable. Wait, let me quickly make it so I can actually hear sound on my computer. It's probably important. I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure it out. Alright, I have sound. Alright. Alright.
Hey, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, nice. That's gonna be nice. Oh, yeah. Sexy. Big sex moment right there, not gonna lie.
So, ironically, we need to flip it. Dexterity is their flaw. Does not make any sense.
Well, that's why I said, like, of the 3 boosts I was thinking of, dexterity was one of the boosts.
Yeah, a detail I forgot about owls is that they fly silently. So another argument for dexterity, because stealth is probably something that they're big about. So ironically, despite the fact that I'm thinking the magic warrior thing, ironically, rogue is a big one in there too.
Well, I mean, there's dexterous weapons. It just, unfortunately, it makes them very mad. Because if you go dexterity based, you still have to use strength for all your attack damage rolls. Well, that might just be bows. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Bows or dexterity?
Yeah, no, but the damage you add is strength.
For thrown weapons. I'm pretty confident.
That may be true. Let me look at finesse really quickly.
You mentioned it. Yeah, there is
finesse. You use your dexterity modifier instead of your strength modifier on attack rolls. You still use your strength when calculating damage. So that bonus to damage is still your strength. Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah, that means
interesting. I guess that kind of makes sense conceptually.
It does, but it does make you more mad.
That's true. But to be fair, if you're building a character that's kind of fighter magic, isn't that kind of in it inherently kind of
It is
mad?
yeah, and so it's even more mad. You realize the
Yep.
more mad you get, the worse. But regardless, yeah, dexterity still makes sense.
Oh, as in it's not like the same
You
mad. It's the
have to,
problem with it.
yeah, you're expanding your multiple ability scores that you're dependent on.
I see what you're saying.
All right,
Now
so
you could
building
take a
flaw.
free ability boost in strength.
Yeah, yeah.
That might balance it out.
I'm
Uh,
yeah, I'm thinking of the flaw.
hmm. So, hmm.
Because I would think it'd
Because
be one of the physical attributes, because they are maybe charisma, because like they're
well, that thought
intelligent
occurred to me.
too.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Well, because that's the interesting thing is like in your mind.
Mhm.
Because the thing is, like, charisma is not necessarily because charisma is like force of personality still, right? And so if we're going with the sage advisor puppeteer thing, I feel like having
It's
low charisma
charisma
doesn't really
vibes.
work with it.
Yeah, see, you can see why I had a struggle with the toss-up for this. That's why I was saying it feels like it has to be one of the physical stats. Maybe
Right.
could we just do a free flaw? I know it's a little bit of a cop-out, but just like free flaw.
The alternative is to just do the 2 boost and no flaw. Isn't that a mechanism?
I think you may be right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that might be an air quote cop out. It's just not having a flaw.
Yeah, no, I'm good for that.
Because I
Because I
think,
can't.
well,
I
because the
mean,
problem is, yeah, there are some because you can't have everything, right? That's the thing.
right.
And there's some conflicting themes. To be fair, this is the this is the initial kind of grinding through the idea, like the very initial kind of like landing on what the core themes are going to be, because you could come at it from a couple different angles. Because you have the big eye perceptiveness owl thing, which I think from the animal's anatomy is a thing, which where you get the wisdom, perception of the world. I think that still makes sense. I think that wisdom feels strong, feels strong. Um, the fact that they can, the fact that it's a notable thing that they can fly silently is the 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 fact that they can fly silently is very notable. Like if I understand correctly, that's notable among birds, as in like
Yeah.
they are. So that to me feels dexterity because stealth is a dexterity based thing, and also the agileness and like kind of that kind of. And there's also a predatorialness about that, where it's not necessarily predatory in massive strength, but like swooping through the night sky and like that kind of like precision type of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
so that makes a strong contender for dexterity wisdom from the animal inspiration. Because unfortunately, the reality is that there's actually no necessarily animal thing. Like they're not golden retrievers. It's not necessarily an animal thing that makes you feel charisma. And it is also important to not get charisma confused with approachableness, because that's not necessarily what charisma means. Because charisma is forceful personality. You could be a very unlikable person and still have high charisma.
Yeah.
In my mind, based off of like the very bare bones of how charisma supposedly works, where it's like you could be compelling and an asshole.
Right.
Because here's the thing, like House MD, have you seen?
I mean, that's a whole archetype. Yeah. 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 No. I mean, yeah.
He's got
Absolutely.
incredibly high charisma, not super likable, but incredibly high charisma. So, weirdly enough, there's not a strong argument to make that owls are notably charismatic.
Well, I would say that you just proved the opposite. There's nothing notable saying that they're likable. They're not golden retrievers, but the whole sage advisor. To be an advisor, you have to have a force of wit, of personality.
That yes, but that's got nothing to do with the animal. That's got to do with the theme we talked about, Strigan fulfilling.
No.
Hear me out here. What makes them a sage advisor is not that they're notably charismatic, because they're not notably lacking charisma either. Just standard, as in there's no boost, no flaw. What makes them end up being advisors is their perception and insight, where they're able
Their
to
wisdom.
see opportunity, they're able to take those opportunities. And in fact, that's why they're puppeteers. They don't necessarily have the force of personality, but they're able to perceive the weaknesses and buttons to push on the people who do. So that's a different angle that accomplishes the same thing, which stays completely thematically with the animal inspiration for Strigan. Which means that I think this would actually be at least to me, I think that the getting rid of the flaw and the free ability boost makes it where we're not making him distinctly lacking in a specific area, which keeps it flexible in some ways. Like you're not able to boost yourself in a free way, but you're also not being pulled back. I don't know. All that being said, Mr. Mechanics Man, I just spewed all the thematic reasons of why I think this makes sense. Mechanically speaking, however, what are your thoughts?
Mechanically speaking, I mean, from a numbers game, that's how you do it. You have a system where you get a free boost and you have to take a flaw, or you have a system where you don't have a free boost and you don't take a flaw. There's still, I think they may have removed it in the newer edition, but depending on your DM, there's the taking an ability flaw to get a boost, regardless of if your ancestry comes with one or not.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm pretty confident it got removed technically because of the whole, like, I don't know, the kind of moving away that both D&D and Pathfinder did from, like, I guess, racism.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Right. I'm like, ancestries can't be naturally good at things because everyone's the same. I know this one literally breathes fire, but they're all the same.
Yeah, well, I'm very grateful because as far as I know, in the player core, the ability boosts and flaws are still the same. But they
Yeah, no. Pathfinder isn't down that road like D&D. It just around. All I'm saying is around the same time. Like Pathfinder's in the infancy of going down that path.
Yes, I'm glad and similar to how 5e is still good, I appreciate that the second edition is still good, and that we don't have to jump ship just yet.
But no, I think as even before you were starting to describe it, when we first talked about it, there is that kind of like Merlin, right? Or like these kind of like advisors that from their knowledge is why they're a powerful resource, not necessarily from a lot of times there's that kind of like lesson learned. Not that that's what this is, but that kind of archetype of this person has information, they provide it, you ignore it because you think you know better, and then you fail. And you learn to respect that opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of archetype. Not that that's what this is, but that whole idea of like, just because someone can't convince you of something, doesn't mean you shouldn't convince yourself of what it is.
Right. Now, I want to throw a wrench in everything I just said. Possibly. Not in a, like this is, I think I feel good about this as it is. Counterpoint. Or a thing that, to use the other one.
And prepare to defend.
I just think mechanically it's probably unfortunately not great. So, but thematically it feels good. Ability, flaw, strength. You get your free boost, and the reason why is you have default dexterity and wisdom, which means you get your sagey advisory either by boosting intelligence, so it's perception and what you know. Your charisma, so it's your perception, your ability to persuade.
This will take a moment.
Or
Constitution.
Or being bulkier to make up for your lack of strength, where you're still survivable and able to leverage. Kind of going in that direction of the whole dexterity and magic base somehow, like some sort of dexterity.
So the one problem is, you go with a flaw, again, of strength. It does kind of get rid of. Well, one, I am looking at an ability right now on the sidebar that I would delete immediately. And but that's fine because this is refining thematics. But also, it kind of gets rid of if you leave it, and this is kind of what you're getting at. If you leave it neutral, it doesn't mean someone's bad at that thing, right? It doesn't mean like this ancestry is intrinsically bad at this trait. But if you put in a flaw, you're kind of implying they're bad at this. If you put in strength, it's implying they're not strong. Regardless of if you make a 18 regardless of that flaw, it implies that ancestry isn't strong.
No, that's fair. I'm good with sticking with the way it is. Because I'm assuming that because you can still boost those other things. You just start off that way, and so let's keep it neutral. Because to be fair, I think most of our ancestries use the
we don't really have a neutral one like this, so
variety.
Yep. It is the spice of life.
Like, you and I are on the same page here. Let's go with it. All right, cool beats. Let me go blow my nose, and then come back and we'll cool. This is fun. This is something I do try to remind myself because it's something that like I've been watching a lot of war videos, pirate software, because YouTube wants to indoctrinate everyone with more as of late. He won the streamer award for the game development category on Twitch.
Nice.
Nice. But he talked about one of the things is
Location reached.
I think one of the things I struggle with is I tend to be a result-oriented person, and I'm trying to become a more journey-oriented person. So the thing that's whether it's I get discouraged easily is I haven't arrived, and the thing about arriving is that arrival is difficult and not necessarily likely, so you can enjoy the journey towards arriving. You may eventually one day arrive and you have fun on the way. And focusing on that, so it's like I remind myself like, even though the spice rack isn't done, talking about these things and their concept is fun. And figuring this stuff out. So I try to remind myself of it.
Blow the nose off your socks.
Still working on it.
I'm gonna get some water and turn off the sink.
Watch yourself. Premier are on the way. Against us, Tenno, but we did it. Mission complete.
Okay. So, awesome. I'm probably gonna wait for Mary Beth to refine the language, because I don't hate Strig.
Oh yeah, that was just. I was like,
No, I was like, that's a very good, like, just throwing something there that seems related. I'll let our linguist kind of think about that one. We'll come back to that. Choose from Lang.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
You can see what I prioritize and what I don't.
No, it makes sense. A chromatic vision. Ooh, you can see in darkness and a dim light just as well as you can see in bright light, although your vision is always in shades of gray. Interesting. Isn't that just how that works anyway?
No.
Really?
No. See. So the thing is, owls strictly they have achromatic vision. Owls strictly see in shades of gray.
Gotcha.
So the thing here is though, although your vision is always in shades of gray, not in darkness. There's a difference of wording here. If you look at dark vision, in normal light you see with color. This is like you can see in the dark, but no matter what, it's in gray. In dark, it's in gray. In light, it's in gray.
Gotcha. Okay. So, similar to Sentinels, that has incredible thematic implications. As far as, not in a bad way necessarily, but I'm just thinking about, I'm digesting that thought. As far as like,
Operator,
don't get me wrong, like I do like kind of like with
You could say
I
we
think
forged
theoretically
a new connection.
Skulverni, Scorpions don't see in
All
color
bonds
either,
accounted for,
but I
operator.
didn't
I have
I didn't
located
follow
you.
that through. I think thinking about like the ancestries we have had, uh, um,
I think it's interesting that they're colorblind, but they're 100 times more sensitive to light, which is where some of that idea of like they have dark vision, but everything's in black and white.
so okay, I've got two thoughts.
Sure.
Thought number one: so Sentinels, the other ones that see everything in in shades of, basically seeing things like lidar.
Daredevil vision. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, basically. Um, and that's why Sentinel stuff is all about the shape of stuff, and a lot of Sentinel stuff is colorless rock. The colors of crystals are more of just a happenstance thing. Um, which is interesting, actually. That's an interesting thought about the flavoring of them. Not to side tangent on Sentinels for a second, but because a lot of times so you know thinking of from a creator, evolution or creator design, however whichever perspective you take, say there's purpose behind stuff.
Mhm.
And so some animals have anatomical features to help with their socialness with themselves and as in like others of their same kind, and then some are specifically made for interactions with everything else that has nothing to do with each other. What's interesting is that if Sentinel's colors shift, that internal kind of churning shifts on emotion, with the way they're currently flavored, that doesn't help the Sentinels at all.
No.
As in, because like for us as humans,
They
seeing
don't.
each other's facial expressions helps us
Yeah.
communicate. For Sentinels, that does not. That um now on the flip side, it's possible that Sentinels can perceive just the slightest, like maybe the tones of their voice when they communicate as Sentinels, maybe being slightly off pitch, either a little high or low, or some of those nuances may kind of communicate emotion where regular creatures may not perceive that. There is the argument to be made that the emotional churn stuff is a biochemist, as in it's just a byproduct, not an intentional thing. Like it's not something they do to communicate, it's just something that other creatures happen to be able to perceive.
Right.
And it's just the nature of, you know what I'm saying, like the whole, like, what's the purpose of it,
Well, I
like
mean, if you think about it, Sentinels are, from what I understand, pretty pragmatic, right?
yeah,
They're
I would say so.
more leaning towards emotion less. So that's not something that they necessarily prioritize. I think it makes sense that um, they don't necessarily have a built-in system for conveying emotion because that's not something that they prioritize. But then you have this interesting biochemical reaction that, while unintentional, does help that communication for other species. But no, I think from a sentinel to sentinel sort of thing, why would you need to factor in emotions? Like sentinels they're both pragmatic, they don't have to worry about that as much. They
Well,
say what
that's
they
why I kind
mean.
of think the slight nuances of pitch higher or lower, where it's like barely perceptible to other ancestries, like that, I think is fine. I think I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
um because the thing is, like, in the weird thing with Sentinels is I think they appear more pragmatic, but because of the musical and sound thing, I always associate that intentionality with sound as being very emotional. And so it's foreign to most ancestries how they portray that, not that it doesn't exist.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
so not necessarily robots. And don't get me wrong, part of this because the Sentinel flavoring has evolved. Because originally they literally were the stand-in for Warforged, basically. Um, I think they've evolved so much beyond
Oh
that
yeah.
and like are very much their own cool thing. But that's one of the reasons why flavorically their stuff is very geometric. Their physical forms are very geometric. Their architecture is very geometric, and how things are shaped is what matters to them. And I think that's neat. I think that's cool. There's a lot there. Now, what's interesting? So I say all that is that there is similar implications, not necessarily the geometric stuff, but there are similar implications to Strigan if they only have the ability to see in shades of gray. Now, what's interesting is depending on how those shades of gray work, that means the lightness or darkness of color matters more and less of its hue.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting that you could theoretically still end up with colored like clothing and stuff that doesn't necessarily look outrageous because the shades of things would affect.
I mean, that's how people like humans deal with it, right? Because red and blue, like the primary colors have very different like darkness values, and you can kind of see there's a certain difference between the darkness of a red and the darkness of a blue. And that's how
Right.
people that struggle with color blindness deal with that and trying to like attire themselves.
So, okay. So it is something where, and it also technically gives the Aldenwald side a similar version of having a different perception of the world vibe that you can play with, which is similar to Sentinel.
I'm realizing it may pose one issue.
Okay.
Demevian. The person who is exploring the world and documenting it is colorblind.
You know,
Or
that's fair.
it adds more interestingness to his character because again, you can still identify colors even if you can't see them. It's just harder, and maybe that's why he became, or he was more inclined to become someone who explores and documents details because he has this training in doing that, and
Well, and
it
there is still the
sparked a
fact that
passion.
you can always ask people what the color of something is.
Yeah.
Um,
Just to be devil's
Now,
advocate to my own ability, that is a thing that introduces.
no. That it does. No, that's why I'm thinking through. Like, cause this is a big thing, and this is a big like decision. I think. Because like the Scleverni, technically they're based off of scorpions, but I didn't go the colorblind route because I think that some of the other themings, like especially the cultural themings I wanted to have with them, were more important. And it's not a one-to-one, right? Like I like taking heavy inspiration from, and that's the thing. You could get the owl vibes without this,
Yeah,
but there's
we already do.
also but there's a cool opportunity. So it's a whole. It's like weighing the pros and cons, weighing the costs and benefits type of thing. Um, so just thoughts. I want you to tell me if they all sound garbage, or not. Either heritage or feat that have the ability to see in color. Like
It's
as
fine
in
with me.
like it's something where generally speaking it's that way, but you could actually have more of your artisan style, which is interesting, don't get me wrong, because if you see color you see the world differently than the rest of everybody does. So there's an interesting kind of little literal, like, you know, the whole being different or seeing the world different, like literally.
Well, I think it's
um
really. I think it's. I waited to do heritages because I figured if I did feats, and this was like a new philosophy because typically we start with heritages and then go feats.
right.
But feats are so like general, like filling this gap, filling that, or whatever. That I figured once we'd finish the feats, it would kind of leave holes that heritages would fill. Of like, it makes sense a heritage would go that way. And so I think it's really interesting. What you're describing to me sounds like a really interesting heritage for Strigan because it is that
Okay.
kind of artistic. I see the world in a different light. I see a beauty that no one else can see.
Literally sees the world in a different light.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think that could be interesting because that has some interesting implications where you take a very normal thing, right,
yeah.
and you have a completely new twist on it, which I think that's always cool in fantasy stuff, is taking something we take for granted and giving you the opportunity to play with it. Like I think that's always interesting.
My backup
Okay.
character becomes the Strigan's like, what shade of color is this? This vibrant wine like color. What do you call it? Red?
Um,
I do think because of the nature of how that works, it probably makes more sense as enhanced or as a heritage versus a feat. I don't think it's something you can just train yourself and be able to see. But yeah, I
That's
think
literally what I just said.
I know. I'm just
Okay.
reaffirming.
I got you. I got you. I got you.
All right, Mr. Typey Wizard, if you want to put it in the Strigan area that
I already did.
I was wondering if you had. Okay. So, on that same margin, mechanically this probably makes 0 sense. It's probably more convoluted than it's worth. But, because if I understand correctly, unlike D&D, like dark vision and stuff like that had to do with how far in the darkness you could see, which as far as I know is actually not a thing in Pathfinder.
Correct.
Because how far you can see is not relevant.
It's how far you can see with your eyeballs, yeah.
Okay. Doesn't darkness affect... Okay, so this is a mechanical question.
Okay.
Doesn't darkness, being shrouded in darkness, affect your ability to hide or obscure yourself or something like that? Like...
So yes, a creature in darkness is hidden unless the seeker, because remember, hidden is based on every person,
Right.
unless the seeker has some precise sense, such as dark vision, in order to see you.
Okay.
And a creature without some means of perceiving in darkness has the blinded condition. But it can see illuminated spots beyond the darkness. So like it can see, like we do, like how we see. Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm wondering if there could be interesting. Actually, let me just read the thing that talks about gaze, because let me not accidentally reinvent what you already put down. Let me just read through all of these real quick before I have too much commentary, because I'm realizing I might accidentally land on the same thing you already did. Alright, so, chromatic vision. At this current moment in time, fine with it, especially with the caveat there's a heritage I can see color, and that's interesting. Powerful build. Your frame has reached the limits of your size. You could attempt to disarm, grapple, shove, or trip creatures up to 2 sizes larger than you, and your maximum encumbered quotient decreases by 1. This is the one I'm assuming that goes away as strength within claw. Based off the conversations we have, I understand 100% why you made this. I think as the flavoring is evolving, I'm not sure.
It doesn't make as much sense.
But I think I have a thought in my head. We'll come back to it. I have a thought in my head that is similar lyrically, but might be more.
Okay.
I don't exactly 100% know how to like actualize it, though I have a thought. But third, piercing gaze. When a creature is hidden from you, just stand and cover there instead of concealed.
That's a pretty strong ability.
Yeah, no, that's also cool as balls. Like that's exactly what I was starting to try to think up of. Not that specific mechanical thing, but I was trying to think of like, okay, especially if you get stuck with seeing the world in gray, it's also the idea if you're super sensitive to light, there's gonna be some cool vision thing you get. And I'm like, my man, already there. All right, so let's cycle back to powerful build. I think. So, there are 2 routes we can go here. Both are similar about the anatomy. One is instead of powerful build is going intimidating build. Or intimidating, or literally just saying intimidating silhouette or something like that. The idea is big, scary looking, regardless of whether there's a physical build behind it.
So scroll down to Ancestry feats level 1. It's going to be on the second page, the first level 1 feat.
Stare down.
No.
So it is kind of on those vibes.
Just before you describe something that was giving the intimidating glare skill feat, I figured I should mention it.
Well, and to be fair, part of it's because of my lack of mechanical knowledge. Some of my ideas are very, very kind of limited to a very specific kind of thing. I've noted because I don't know a lot about the just giving another thing. Like a lot of things will be like, ah, you gain this feat or this other thing that exists already. Like I don't know those very well, and so I don't think of that kind of type of ability. But so yeah, one goal is big, scary, and imposing, and getting like circumstance bonus or something intimidation related.
Right.
Um, that or I don't want to necessarily give an action type thing, but like something like that. Like it's the idea of like you like poof out your stuff and you're like I'm scary as crap, like that kind of thing. So intimidating build or intimidating silhouette or like or you know um you know I don't know, naming wordsmithing, but the other the other way around is to the other thing to do, or the other take we could have is doing the whole they're silent thing
Right.
and having something about how that they move very quietly, and so having some sort of, I don't know, not bonus to stealth, but kind of. Basically, I don't like. I know that, like, it's one of those things. Like, is there anything mechanically like where there's something that makes sense? You see, you know what I'm saying? Like, thematically, it's about them moving quietly and like just they could walk up right behind you, despite being large and stuff. They're large birds that move silently, and there's something. Frankly, there's something intimidating about just that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was something because I'd actually noted the silent flying thing, and it was too powerful at the point where I was trying to implement something like that. It was too powerful because I was going for I was trying to think of like silent flying, but
Right.
so it'd been on my mind, but just kind of like being less literal and more of just they're more stealthy than, oh, I fly quietly. I mean, you could absolutely sidebar level give. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving like a circumstance bonus um to stealth checks when you're like already concealed or something, right? Like when the enemy doesn't already have a grasp on where you are, you could
Right.
disappear, or I
So
like
does
there'd have to be some condition to it.
yeah, I agree. So does how does movement and stealth work? Like, are you able, if you're concealed or whatever, can you just move normally, or is there any constraints on that?
You so that's the thing with, right, like concealed and hidden. That is from people. So there's a certain extent of like line of sight, for instance, can give you like automatic concealment. For instance, like we said with the darkness thing, if someone doesn't have a sense to perceive you, you are hidden from them in darkness. So there's a certain extent of like you hide, you take the hide action to kind of break that. Their perception of you is like where you were standing before, kind of like how it is in
Right.
D&D. As long as you don't move like back into
Line of sight.
on like a following turn. I think you can theoretically hide and still be kind of moving in their sight on your turn because it's the whole idea of like actions and like the sequence in which they take place.
Right.
Um, but no, yeah, you hiding is giving you a condition. It is then up to you to continue to have that condition. If that makes any sense.
Okay, this is probably broken, but spaghetti throwing out thematic thoughts.
Right.
An ability to, um, as part of a stride action, have an auxiliary action be the hide action.
I'm gonna need to take a look at Rogue to make sure that that isn't part of their kit,
Like
because again, the
literal
whole
kit.
just because you need to of not
Yeah,
stepping
yeah.
on the toes of other classes, but
Right.
that gives them something that is especially with them having dexterity. Okay, let's see. Do
Eliminating this target will have a significant impact on enemy
Because I think, ironically, in my mind, that feels thematically like moving silently. The idea to be able to, the fact that you can hide while moving.
Yep. No. As like a free action reaction to
Type thing.
taking a stride, you're able to hide as part of it. There's nothing in their base kit. There may be a feat for it, but it doesn't appear to be.
And don't get me wrong, I don't know how balanced that is.
Yeah. Giving
Ruck is nearby. Be warned that he is a formidable adversary with an almost inhuman hatred for all that is
so the
not
hide action, right, is you huddle behind cover to become hidden rather than observed. And then you roll a stealth check, or the GM rolls your stealth check in secret. Compared to the perception DCs of the creature you're observed by, you gain a circumstance bonus from your cover to that check. That's a good point. There may be something. So here's another thing. Gets kind of on the silent movement. Is a strong ability, but I think a little less broken.
Okay.
So when you've hidden,
Yep.
striding is too clunky. So in order to stride while maintaining the hidden condition, you have to sneak. Which sneaking is, you stride up to half your speed.
I think we're going. I was thinking something very similar.
Yeah. Very easily
So-
just have a sneak be your full speed.
Yeah, I like that because the idea of moving silently, and so it makes it less likely that even if you're walking within perception and stuff like that, you're less likely to be suspected. Okay. Yeah, and I feel like that's circumstantial enough that's not terrible, from a brokenness standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think it gets that cool silent flight thing, which is very notable about owls. I think that's notable, right? I feel like that's something. That's
No, it's
well
notable. That's something that even in my research into owls I came across. So.
Okay.
I will.
So yeah, now on that same margin, like I think of the two, I like your glaring feat, and so I think that by itself is probably good to use just a feat where you're going down that route. I think the silent moving thing, especially since your ability boosts your dexterity and wisdom, I think it very much gives you that whole subtle, stealthy boy thing going on. Which ironically, I'm realizing that Strigan are becoming like, which is funny because they're huge. It seems counterintuitive, but it's like a Jack Reacher was a super secret assassin. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's like that vibe. You know what I mean? But that's actually interesting because that's not normal. But in a really weird way, owls in real life are predatorial, almost assassin-like birds, despite being decently large.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, it actually kind of gives that cool vibe, and that's an interesting, cool niche of like having a character that literally, it's not you forcing a big character. It's like not like having a Goliath rogue. Like legitimately, there's some legitimate, like that's actually viable, which is cool. And I think this is making it where these ancestries, which is what important to me, are survive on their own merit to an extent. Like, especially at least if the core do. If the uncommon and rare ones have some overlap with the others, sure. Like, do Solarans and Elves have a lot of overlap to an extent? Yeah. Are Solarans, and honestly, especially since Solarans have like the, what do we call them, Solites or whatever it is, like
Solite.
or whatever our term for them is these days.
I'm pretty sure it's Solite at this point. Let me just check. It should be written down.
They won't be bothering us anymore. Let's get out of here.
Solarites.
Solarite. Yeah, the fact that they have the Solarites, like, they're the most, like, Solaran, the more that we build on them, the more the fact that they're rare makes sense because they're the mechanically kind of out there ones.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you'd expect your rare ancestries to be. Just like the freaking cosmic constructs that end up having plant exoskeletons. Like, I feel a little better about some of my crazy ideas with the Solar when I see those other rare ancestries where it's like,
The inbox
Gosh,
has messages
yes.
for the operator.
Uh,
you know, that was something interesting. I don't know if I noted this to you or not, but I found it very interesting. I was looking at automatons and androids and those those ancestries. It's very notable that the flavoring very on purposely makes sure that they have souls. Like, it goes out of its way. Like, the android thing, it's like literally there's some, I don't exactly know where the souls come from, but like there's something to do with the boneyard or crap like that ends up with an android ending up with a soul. And then also the automatons are from an empire that was, before it collapsed, put people's consciousnesses in. So like, there's never a situation of like the singularity type deal. It's only ever like which I was like, huh. I'm curious of why Paizo specifically is like being very harpy on that, because it's definitely not the flavoring of Warforged at all.
right.
Warforged are just straight up robots. So it's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. Very. Very curious.
Very, very curious indeed. Oh. Oh, excuse me.
I see.
And it does. Sorry, very, very brief side tangent because I
Of
was thinking
course.
about this the other day. It does raise the interesting thought about.
And we're out.
People absolutely will choose and enjoy playing robots knowing fully well that they're not alive and that they're going to be limited in the whole you can't reject your programming and some of that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying, where it's like you're knowingly playing a not living creature and that's a character type. You know what I'm saying? It's like it would be very similar to when you're role playing like your pet or whatever, like, you know what I mean, like. And it makes me curious about like the possibility of having like an uncommon or rare ancestry that is a Warforged type, but making it very clear that that ancestry is not fully sentient. It's just very advanced. Like, there is restrictions of like, if you play this ancestry, you know, you are beholden to whoever, you know, like there's certain things you can't not do. Like, you don't have 100% free will. Like, you have a lot of free will, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that could be an interesting way around my issue with some of that. Is just being upfront about and making it not common, but it's like, this is a super advanced thing, but you are not alive. Like, I don't know. It's just it's really fun. So that way there's no implications about the creating of life, because it's not. And that could be interesting too, roleplay, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have an evil master, and like the party has to go fight your master, and then you're like, at the end moment, you're about to land the final blow, and it just stops.
Yep. Violate the first or second one. But yeah, no, I don't know. It's one of those things of like, and it theoretically leaves the door open for people who are more comfortable with that type of thing to, you know.
An interesting mechanic for that. Kind of like how kobolds and I guess Tracy and whatever get that kind of lineage or whatever, like trait where they choose a lineage. You could kind of like paladin style choose like tenets of like your laws. There's like a table of like laws, like the justice tenets or whatever, and so you have like a series of like, if you choose this tenet or whatever, you get these rules that you have to. It's either like cannots or like have tos or something. I don't know.
No, that's cool conceptually. Another kind of similar to that vibe, though it's theoretically air quote kind of less flexible, is that the tenets are the heritages. as in it's basically the purpose you were built for, which that affects how you were programmed, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's definitely an interesting concept. Like, back burner idea, not right now, but like, it's something I could be comfortable with that as an idea. And making it uncommon or rare, because it's something where, like, making it where it's like, I'm, like, for instance, I'm thinking if you would encounter the NPC version of a lower, like, less advanced version of these things, this also feels like an all-in-one thing to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. No, I'm noting it for a 2.0 edition.
Yeah. Because it's something where, because I think my big gripe, or my big ickiness about it is, because, don't get me wrong, I love robot characters. I love robots. I was going to get into robotics engineering before I found out that I'm probably not cut out for it. You know, just because the amount of math required to do robots is nuts. And not that I'm bad at it. Don't get me wrong, I'm bad at it now. I did okay at calculus. I got A's in everything except calculus B, and I got a B in calculus B. So, you know, I'm capable of the math. It's just, you know, there's a lot of, I don't know if I'd enjoy the process, I think is the thing I recognize, is I think, similar to what we're talking about with this, I enjoy the process of writing software. Like, I enjoy not just the result, but I enjoy the process of figuring it out and doing it.
Yeah.
I don't have enough exposure to very hardware-centric things to know if I would be good at that or not. I don't know. But anyway, I say all that. Sorry, my lack of focus is showing. I say all that because my big issue with robotic characters in a setting I'm creating is if they're supposed to be equivalent to other ancestries, as in they're alive, they're sentient, they have their own thoughts, right? Because the issue I always have with that, especially if they're artificially created, right? If they're just Sentinels are kind of like it, but they're naturally occurring, which is why they're not quite robots, but they have a similar vibe. And like I said, they have evolved a little bit past that, where we've kind of left some of that theming behind, which I'm okay with, because I think it is better suited for what they are. But that's also why they're called Sentinels, like the name kind of came from that. And I also think it's fine that they're called Sentinels. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I do think there is the thematics about them that still kind of make sense that way. Because people call mountains Sentinels, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's still a vibe there of the whole. Anyway, I digress. But I have a problem with the implication that life can be created by something that's not God. Or, at the very least, I don't want to say God adjacent, because that sounds sacrilegious as crap, but what I mean by that is, like, if there's some analog to that concept in a parable or fantasy setting, like, that's why I'd rather have, you know, like, with the Lorian, there's kind of similar vibe there, as far as, like, they're kind of the most uncertain. I haven't, like, gotten deep into their stuff yet. And it's also possible it's something where they just, their origins are unknown. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just kind of cropped up during that time period.
I mean, just because, you know, right, currently we have the thought of, like, Solarin left an impression, right, like a shadow was cast on them. Doesn't mean that they weren't alive before that.
Right, it just changed them.
It just changed them, like everything changed during the Great Shift.
And that's something too, where it's like, I'm okay with the idea that a universe that was built this way has more flexibility in how things develop, because it still started theoretically from a divine source thematically. You know what I'm saying? Kind of, to an extent, you know, or it could have. I don't know. It's. I know, I'm sorry. I know I drive myself nuts with this, and it does frustrate me that I go back and forth on this stuff so much.
because it makes things difficult, and I'm very well aware of that. And I don't know why I get bothered by it so much, or like why I end up having this like very swingy back and forth about it. Um, I don't know, but but yeah. So like that's why I'm like Valorian. I feel okay with for the most part. I try not to think about it too hard. Uh, but it's all this idea of something that started as alive changing is different than something that wasn't alive becoming alive. That transition's a little bit more problematic for me, because that's something where my big belief of why the whole singularity is never going to happen is because we don't have the ability to create a soul, and so you're never going to get an AI that thinks for itself. You're going to have an AI that's very advanced and very programmed, and can potentially change its behaviors, but within a very limited. There's no spontaneity that will ever happen. You're not going to have AIs that get inspired. You're never going to have AIs that dream. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're never going to have this influence from the outside, right?
Right.
Because I'm a big believer that we are not 100% anatomically driven, right? Where our drives and stuff do not completely originate from chemicals in our brains and bodies. Like, that's not literally just reaction to stimuli and instinct, right? Which is how animals operate. Animals are instinct driven. They are basically very, very well programmed beings, but they can't really extend past that, right? And so I don't know. It's something where it bothers me to think we can't be God. We don't have the ability to do the things God does. We could take stuff God has created and turn it into new stuff, or like, you know, rearrange it or whatever, and that's cool. But we don't have the ability to make something out of nothing. And my big thing with construct or artificial beings is we don't have the ability to create life. Right? We can take things that were already alive and nurture them, but that process was started by God a long time ago, right? Like, we can't start it from nothing. We have to take already existing mechanisms and leverage them. We can't invent new mechanisms by themselves, like out of nothing. And artificial beings kind of feel like they go on that other side, which is why, like, even in Paizo's thing, it's like you're taking a soul that already exists and just putting it in something else, because you can't artificially create that thing. And like magical beings doesn't necessarily feel great either. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the whole like constructs stuff I have no problem with, right? Like automatons, like all that generally speaking is fun. There's a difference between when something there's a difference between a sidekick, a familiar, a pet, and a player character. Because player characters represent kind of your projection into a world.
Yeah, well, no, I think it's notable that all of the playable ancestries Paizo put a soul in, right?
Right.
But what's your gripe with magical beasts?
No, so specifically, as in like something that's a sentient robot because of magic. As in magic created a soul type thing, is what I have a gripe with that. Not magical beasts generally speaking. Magical beasts are fun. But
So,
like, magic being responsible for a soul, that's something I'm not necessarily comfortable with.
okay, so, well, I mean, it depends on how you think of magic, right? Like, if you have because I think this is where I differ a little bit. Because I kind of think of like for instance, like Pinocchio, right?
Right.
Pinocchio became a real boy, even as like giving him a soul, right? And now the pixie isn't God, but there's sort of I don't know, I feel like there's biblical precedence for God, you know, not giving out souls to things that don't have souls, but that kind of like acting in the present and like rewarding in the present of like there's a certain extent of like ancient magic that isn't player accessible. I think the problem is if it's player accessible. If it's like cosmic magic, right? Like unexplained magic that gives something a soul, I think that's a certain extent of like, you know, same way God's up there with his little cauldron crafting people, putting them in a human sack, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with unexplained magic giving a soul. I think when you explain it, there's an issue.
Yeah, I think that kind of is, to me, on that kind of vibe, because I've thought about that. That's, in my mind, that's kind of like the hand-wavy divine magic type of thing, where it's like, it could be magic that originates from a divine source, and life is kind of divinely originated. I mean, every mythological thing is the idea that life originates from a divine source. Frankly, even evolution thinks of it that way, but in their mind, the divine source is the universe itself as a conglomerate, because like the Big Bang and the whole, like, it required an entire collapsing of everything that was in order to into everything that is, type of thing, right? And so there is a you know, they don't use the lingo of like divine stuff, but it's the idea of like there's a divine cosmic. It's like when cosmic becomes divine, as in things of massive scale, like the universe in its entirety. Not any specific element of it, but in its entirety. And so in some ways, I feel like some of that, frankly, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, hand waving is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be very well used. I feel like magic is a very easy flux capacitor hand wavy thing, especially types of magic like cosmic, unknowable, or ancient. Like those are always adjectives to something that's like, it's inaccessible, and it kind of is a Deus Ex Machina in any way it needs to be. And so I don't know. It's one of those things of like, and it's at a point where like I don't necessarily know what else to say about it. It's part of the problem, or I say problem. Part of it's the factor of, at least for me, and it may be a me thing. It's like, you know, different people, different convictions. Like, for me, there's, for whatever reason, at least at this moment in time, I don't feel comfortable enough to completely disconnect from the real world entirely, where it's completely standalone, where it can be whatever. Like, as in, like, because to be fair, there is analog to, like, you know, you can have really great symbology by having a mythology, you know, type thing. Like,
Yeah.
To be fair, that is what Narnia does. Like, that is exactly how that works. It is a fantasy book. And people, you know, Christians enjoy it. Like, there's a certain aspect of, like, Aslan is an analog to God. But it's also basically, it's based off a whole lot of folklore.
Well, I think it's sorry, just stepping in for a
Please go
second.
for it.
I think this is the interesting thing, right? Because there's a very interesting perception, right? God is unchanging.
Right.
But just because like he's unchanging in like motivation and like conviction, right? The way he feels about things don't change, but he acts like things happen. Jesus wasn't here from day one. Like Jesus was, but like as a human, Jesus
Right.
at a point in time came to Earth. God
Right.
enacted that at a point. And so I think that's why, again, I think if you have like the origins of like, oh, the artificer summoned magic and gave his little boy a soul, you have some problems of like humans creating intelligence.
Right.
But hand wavy, a race coming into being later
Right.
is not a problem to me. Because again,
Right.
God acts.
Right. No, and to be fair, that's something similar to happen in Narnia too. There were some, right, because there was the mice that bit through the cords of Aslan's cords, and then they became sentient, full-blown Narnians later. And so no, and that's why I think it's one of the reasons like the Vlorian thing doesn't bother me 100%. I think the problem is I'm not able to do the C.S. Lewis disconnect. Like if I was able to get into like Aslan land, like you know, and like have that comfortability, some of these things wouldn't be so problematic. Because there is this aspect of because like I think what I've done for better or worse is I've distanced the divine elements so far away that it feels easier to not screw it up without completely disavowing its existence entirely, right? But
Your job
in
is to
some
distract
ways,
the enemy while a fellow
like
Tenno operative raids the ship for much needed
the
supplies.
books of Lord of the Rings,
Make
like
your
the
presence
standard
known.
books, kind of did that, where it's not the divine's
have
not
just
there,
shut
and in
down
fact
all
other books
systems.
apparently extrapolate
I'm
on it,
sending life support
but it's
capsules
so
your way.
distant that it never feels like it's either for good or bad misrepresented in the story per se. There is still clearly good and evil, and those good and evil still seem to line up with the biblical sense of good and evil, right? Like it's not just some horrible, twisted morality system. And I think, like I mentioned before, I'm more on the Tolkien side of like it's fiction, and I'm not really focusing on there being a divine element at all. And it being more focused on the interactions with these more kind of physical good-evil things, versus where Narnia, there is a lot more of a subtle divine presence. It's just not done in the standard way. But like the like Narnians worship Aslan. Like it's not all the same lingo and the same but like at its heart it is. Like a lot of that analog and analogy is there.
Life support on the way.
I think my big thing has always been how players interact with it as being those characters, which is more. You know what I think? Thinking about it out loud, reading Narnia is less of a stumbling block than role playing.
Well,
Right?
I remember, yeah,
Or a possible stumbling block.
yeah. I remember that like
I've
the
delivered
first
a
thing
life
that
support
really
capsule to the
like
area.
started
Activating it
this
will buy you more time.
conviction for you was Luke praying at the table to his deity, which I don't, you've never really described it specifically, like exactly what he did, but there's a certain extent of I don't think that's acceptable regardless of your religious convictions. Like that to me was a Luke misplay. Because like people that play clerics, even in roleplay heavy situations, they don't bow their head and say, "Dear Azubith, please gift." Like they're like, okay, I divinely. They
Some
don't.
people do.
They don't. Like that's not. It. Yes, there's some people, but some people also describe sex scenes. And bear in mind.
As in,
Bear in
like
mind.
legitimate, like as in, like literally the same way you would do it if you were legitimate.
Yeah, and there's like there's a certain extent of like D&D, for instance, very liberal thing, a very liberal game nowadays, 5e, and there's a lot of like not wanting to step on other people's religious toes, as that were, and so you don't see that because that would make some people uncomfortable at the table. So like,
I've delivered
yes,
another life
there
support
are
capsule.
tables where that happens, and it's run that way, but they're playing the game wrong, is what I'm saying.
I think that's fair. No, I see what you're saying. And to clarify with the Lou situation, to his credit, I asked him as like, do you want to, you know, beseech the promise or anything like that in this moment for this thing? Because I was basing it off of something I seen in Critical Role during the resurrection thing. And he didn't like literally like do the full 9 yards like he would if it was real, but he still did like the kind of like praying aloud over food type of thing, where it's like, hey, promise, can you help us out here type of thing. And it was something where it wasn't like too religious. It's just there's something about it where it was like it was a recognition of this. Personally, especially since the promise was supposed to be an analog to God, it started getting weird because of the factor of like I don't know. It's the factor of, I think it's that it's too real and not disconnected enough for me. Because if it was a book, I wouldn't necessarily be bothered by it. Like, I'm not bothered by reading Narnia, right? And and there are characters in that book that are based off of people from this world, real life, and it still doesn't bug me. Seeing both acting out and seeing people act it out is I don't know. It's because there's a part of my brain that's like, my brain feels like I'm hitting a fallacy in my own mind of like, it's not as different as you think it is.
No, it's like how I have an atheist in my brain. It's okay. We all have hypocrisy in our brains. It's okay.
Well, there's also a certain degree, right, where it's like sometimes when something isn't, we are not able to clearly define why something bothers you, and you're just shooting at what you feel like probably it is, but then you start doing it's like, maybe it's not that, because like that logic doesn't hold up. Yeah, it's because frankly, here's the thing. What's annoying is if I wasn't uncomfortable with this, I would have such cool ideas for that kind of thing. Like, you know, and it, like there's a lot of cool symbology and good things here like, that are possible with it. And I do know that something that influenced it other than Luke was the factor that I had a conversation with Cameron Sawyer, and so my conversation with Mimi that have screwed me up on that front, where it's something where I've never been able to shake that card, because like Cameron ran into a similar problem. He was trying to write a Christian book about people with powers and kept running into problems. And I don't agree with everything he said, but there was something about that I related to when it came to this, and how I keep having this back and forth problem with. I think slowly over time, the way that I've started shifting that's made me less uncomfortable is looking at this like building a chair. A chair is not inherently glorifying the god, but it is glorifying the fact that he gave you the skills to build a chair. Right. And then if I give that chair to someone who needs a chair, like as silly as that sounds, is an aspect of seeing this as a creation. I think the nuances I'm still trying to work my way through are how that is being impacted. Right? As in like how people interact. Is the thing I'm creating very likely to be a similar? Because like you and I have had conversations, very good conversations about this in the past, where you can't prevent certain people from doing certain things. So it's the whole, how easy am I making it for it to be bad? I can't make it not at all. There's no way to do that. But like, how easy am I making it, right? And I feel very comfortable with where we're at right now. I don't think it makes it for a giant stumbling block. I think there's a certain degree, because of the fact that I'm avoiding certain things, it makes it less likely to be a stumbling block, right? I feel very comfortable with how we handle it right now. You know, if anything, maybe I could tone the language down. But other than that, other than that, I think, generally speaking, the way the campaign's run right now is good. I really don't have problems with it. I don't have qualms about the setting. Don't have qualms with the fact that there aren't churches. It's bad or good. Like, the fact that that's not really... And is that realistic? No. But that's intentionally being avoided. For good or bad, right? Because maybe for some people, it would be so much better if I did that. But on the same hand, for some people, that make it so much worse. Which is why, for me, it's like good versus evil. And really, in their most simplified forms, right? Kind of getting rid of the religiousness part of it, and more of just the very pragmatic. You know, we're not talking about like, hey, do you go to church on Sunday? It's more like, if you see if you see depravity, you do something about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're really kind of focusing on the very open simple of it.
Right.
And so there's no commentary on dogma. There's no commentary on that aspect of it. There is this commentary on moral good and evil, right? And how it affects us and how we interact with raw good and evil, regardless of whether it comes from people or demons or what have you. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that I'm comfortable with. And I think part of my problem is that there are certain things that are hard to kind of hand wave without having those questions be asked. Because that's actually really good. This is the problem I have with robot characters. Is the existentialism that inherently comes with those types of characters. I think of every book and every movie that explores that concept is always this, am I alive? And that's not what's the conclusion, like what's the good conclusion of that in that setting? That's good and not kind of just wrong. You know what I'm saying? Not wrong is like moralistically wrong on, you know, like killing somebody, but just not a healthy outcome, right? From like coming away with like newfound knowledge. It's intriguing. Like I think it's neat to do this whole like, you know, am I alive? What does it mean to be alive? Because that is a lens of what it means to be alive and us appreciating being alive.
They could not do this without you.
But that is a helpful perspective of an appreciation from the outside, right? Where what I'm saying is like when you're seeing something, contemplating that, you have a newfound appreciation for what you have that theoretically that doesn't. And even in the films where they say that it does, you know what I'm saying? Where it maybe takes a problematic angle when you're trying to put yourself in those shoes in a meaningful way.
No, I definitely see how that could theoretically be a stumbling block, but I think there's also the certain... It's a weird nuance, and I think part of the problem here is, you know, we don't have all the answers, right? We don't know...
That's
we don't...
absolutely part of the problem.
One big problem is we don't know where the soul, you know, ends and the anatomy begins, right?
That's true too. I'd agree with that.
But like, I would say a dog is alive, right? You want to talk about like, if humans are the only things with souls, there's that certain thing of like, and you know, dogs react and act and get inspired to go pee. Like, there is a certain extent of free thought, right? Free thought and expression that exists outside of humans.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, 100%. And that's kind of where I think that my comfortability with having that type of character in that very specific context is potentially okay.
The problem is, again, of like, you don't know where that stops, right? At what point does it become this is because we have souls?
I think that kind of affects like how we roleplay our pet stuff. Is we have real world analog to that, and so we can kind of, you know, very easily stay within the realms of that, where when you add this and it doesn't actually exist. And that's the thing of like when it becomes a character, right? When you have a player character, because do dogs wrestle with good and evil, right? There's an implication that maybe they do. I mean, they seem to have the perception about people who are bad, or at least threatening, right? There's this whole, is it moralistic, or is it straight up pragmatic? Or is there, I mean, to be fair, I don't think good and evil is completely metaphysical, right? I think there are physical elements of it, 100%. And it seems like, you know, even the animal kingdom can react to that kind of thing, like cruelty. Why is that value? Like, it makes sense that, you know, God is in everything as far as like his fingerprints. So I think there is that inherent understanding. Like, I would say that. But there is a certain degree to God's fingerprint. Well, yeah, there's a philosophical...
Well, the problem is, because here's the thing, right? Again, bearing on dogs. Dogs don't exist, right? Like, dogs are a byproduct of wolves. Wolves were created, and we have made dogs from wolves. Wolves were the foundation, but dogs are from wolves, right? We can agree on that?
Right. Yeah, I think so, yeah. The only nuance I would say is that the genetic potential for dogs was there.
Sure.
But, yeah, I'm here
That's what I was getting at. Is like, but we changed it, right? The same way we made a chair from wood. Yes, the potential for a tree to be a chair was there, but...
I see what you're saying. Fair enough. You're saying continue.
But it's funny, because I was about to bring up inanimate objects. If you're talking about God's fingerprint on things, he made the metal, he made the rock that builds the robot. And sure, like, trees are alive. Scientifically proven trees are alive. And we build stuff from wood all the time. So this is more of a stretch, but there is the sort of thought process of if you build a robot, God's foot hand has been on it in every component that makes it up.
Yeah, no, that was when I kind of was, when I started saying like, it's a big philosophical rabbit hole, is I started having that thought about the fact that God's fingerprint is on the things in question. So no, no, it's a very valid point. And also, God's fingerprint is on the people making the thing.
Yeah.
Right? And there is such a thing as divinely inspired. No,
And like, there is... No, like, and I'm not trying to make you rethink your philosophy, but there's a lot of things. And like, talking about Cameron and his powers, there is biblical precedence for abilities, supernatural abilities.
Yeah.
And, you know, and healing.
That's
Healing is inherently giving life. Like, it's not creating life, but it is giving life. And healing is a power.
I am so glad you said that, because that is actually one of the reasons I have problems with some of this stuff. Because where does that healing come from?
Good.
Right.
The tram has been rerouted.
And so that's something where
it
comes from God, and there's something wrong with portraying it. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong in fiction and writing about healing. I've read Frank Frazier's book. There's stuff I don't have a problem with. I will say Ted Decker stuff always kind of felt like it was towing the line. Like stuff like Skin or Showdown or those series of books always felt a little like it was a stretch. Like it never... Those felt like Christian inspired. As in not actually Christian themselves, but like Christian adjacent. Where, you know what I mean? Like where it's like, this... I don't know exactly how I feel about this. Because it's clearly stretching it in some areas too far, but the whole thing's fictitious. So it's like, is it a problem? And so like, I always had that like question mark thing with Ted Decker stuff. Frank Brady stuff, most of the time the answer was no. Most of the time I was like, it's fine. Don't get me wrong, there was, I think, the Frank Brady book. I don't think it was a Frank Brady book. Was it Frank Brady or Ted Decker that wrote the one about the invisible sin dragon? I forget what the book's called, but no, there legitimately was a book about an invisible dragon that was like a thing, and people would get, like, if they sinned or like they did something bad, they'd get like a blotch on their chest that like marked them, and this thing would kill them. It was, I can't remember that was a Ted Decker
an episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah. Yeah,
If they did something wrong, they'd get a... No, Gregory.
Yeah.
It's literally an episode of... Okay.
Yeah, so I remember. I remember.
Alright.
But yeah. So, no, it's... Yeah, it's... man. Anyway, just... No. And I do love these conversations. Like, it's one of those things, like... I feel like my perspective's ever evolving on these types of things. And, like, it's one of those things where talking it out helps me think about how I feel about it. And it's something where I think even now, with where I'm sitting now, I think that it's not too much of a blocker to be able to do stuff that makes sense. Like, it's not blocking Warren, it's probably blocking Warframe. Or specifically, the flavoring of an artificial character where they're sentient. Right? And I don't think I have the comfortability to do a Paizo approach and explain that it has a soul, because I can't think of a way I'm happy with that, because it would have to come from a divine source, because souls do not come from divine sources. Now, building a machine that could be animal-like, I think I believe that. That I think I could be perfectly fine with. I just don't ever envision those characters as being sentient. As in, they can make decisions, they can be a super advanced animal, and animals have relationships. Like, I think there is...
Again, it's the whole question of where does the soul start, is the problem.
Right. And I think that there could be a way, flavorically, to flavor it, where you're very clear about it, intentionally, guys. And it's an interesting character to play, because you're playing the golden retriever of the party, right? And you know that ahead of time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not trying to play a character that's gonna have an existential crisis.
Well, here's the interesting thing, and this may just be coming from a place of lack of an analog for it in the world, right?
Right.
But from what I've observed from our world, the only people that can ask, "Am I alive?" are the ones that are.
Right.
You don't see a dog having an existential crisis about
Yeah, exactly.
whether they're
And that's what I'm
sentient or
saying.
not.
That's my thought, is that if you flavor it very carefully, you can make it very clear that's the type of character you'd be playing, where you're never gonna have that plot. It's not
And
gonna
that's what I was
stop
saying of
certain
like,
people,
well,
which
if they
I'm
try to
not
do
gonna be
that,
worried about.
they would be playing it wrong, is what I was getting at. Like,
Yes,
yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, and I fully agree. And in my mind, like we've talked about before, it's I'm not setting it up for that right off the bat. If they do
Right.
it, that's a stretch, and I can't stop that. But it's inherently not, not causing problems. You know what in my mind?
Right.
So yeah, that I'm fine with. I'm fine. To be fair, that's what I do when I play monsters. Technically, I'm never gonna have, I'm not gonna have not a bugbear, because technically those are sentient humanoids. But like, I'm never gonna have an aboleth being like, "Am I alive?" So, and frankly, I think I treat some sentient monsters as just evil incarnate. Like, there's a certain degree where it's like, there's no morals thing going on here. They're just evil. In the same way that demons are living beings
Right.
that make this, like, I just kind of think of those things as that.
Man, that was a real
really
great conversation about powerful build.
Oh man, you want to put some Bopple Battle real quick?
Sure.
All right, I'll hop in there in a second. My wife's calling. Hello. Awesome.